Yes, okay. Welcome to this session. So far, we have talked a lot about building thriving communities, but this session will be more about the second part of the title that we wanted to include as a topic of our conference, and that is social change. And social change as it is understood as political and socio-economical activism. And when we talk about social change, the real meaning of it is dismantling systems of oppression in the society. Everyone is properly shocked. But you can also describe it as building a more equal, fair, inclusive, compassionate world for everyone. Tango communities always reflect the surrounding society and the surrounding culture. In that sense, tango communities are not necessarily a driving agent for change, but the changes that happen in the surrounding societies will be reflected in tango communities. And so today we wanted to have a panel consisting of 3 speakers that have been involved in social change activism, specifically related to patriarchal gender norms and heteronormativity of tango communities. So how this panel will work is I'm going to ask each of you to spend 7 to max 10 minutes presenting yourself, your work and experience in the field of social change activism in tango. And I want you to finish with the most valuable lesson learned from your experience. Would you like to start, Astrid?
Okay. So
please keep it close to your mouth.
Can you hear me? So this is okay? Not too loud, not too... okay, my name is Astrid Weiske. I was born in the end of the 60s in North Rhine-Westphalia, in the western part of Germany. I had my personal coming out on a very early age as a lesbian woman, in age of 16 in the mid of the 80s. I'm coming up with that because at that time I was growing up in a small town, 60,000 inhabitants. And at that time, it was a very repressive and time for people who had been gay, lesbian, and trans people. And also in society, it was really weird, and we all had to fear about rejection, bad talking, and that is the environment I grew up. And when I came 88 to Berlin, I left the area because I was 20, I finished my A-levels, and I need to be somewhere to become myself. And that I couldn't live in that town anymore. So I came to Berlin before the wall came down, and that was the beginning of my personal liberation and as a lesbian woman. And I found people, I felt accepted, I do not have to explain, I didn't have to fear so much of rejection or bad things. So Berlin was a great place to be. And then I made my studies here, and then I got in touch with tango while I was photographing a documentary about a person who has a specific passion. And I choose a guy who was crazy for tango. And I witnessed his journey, and that brought me first time in touch. And the very first touch I had was the tango. I visited my first milonga. I heard the music, and that was it. That made the click, the music. And I observed this environment. It was a chameleon theater at that time, a milonga, and I was fascinated by the people who had been browsing counterclockwise through this old scratchy music. And I was so fascinated how this works and everything like that. So I finished my work as a photographer, documentary, and I just thought I want to learn that. But at that time, I had no time to do that because I was so busy with my profession. And 3 years later, I got an opportunity here in Berlin. Some friends of mine, female friends, they told me about a female tango class starting up. And that sounds appealing to me because all the other stuff was, I felt not really, not really interested in going to a heteronormative class, because I came from the rigid rejection of heteronormative people, and it didn't feel safe for me. But this women offer and the friends I was with, that was a great start to do with the tango. So, and at that time we had no role change concept, so we had to choose which role we like to do. And I personally thought, okay, I want to learn to lead. I couldn't identify myself with the follower role. Yeah, so I started to learn leading. For the first 10 years was leader only, and I took a lot of effort in learning that. So, and I felt safe in that group, and we went out as a group into the Berlin straight community. And that was the very first moment where we all had been scared and because going as a minority group, a very vulnerable minority group, into such a rigid heteronormative role concept and behavior thing that we are not used to anymore, because we looked out for other opportunities to share our time. Yeah. So, and that was an interesting thing. And in Berlin it wasn't that bad as we all had feared. So it was quite okay. And year after year, as we progressed, and I had the interest in dancing, but there was not any queer or same-sex dancing. Just a little group, and that's it. And the word queer tango was not invented yet. And but I heard from other communities in Buenos Aires first that there's a little queer community over there in the traditional origin of the Argentine tango, and what they experienced, kicking out of the dance floor and getting all that rejection from the straight community. And there's also, same time, similar was Hamburg. Marga Nagel and Ute Walter, they created the first international queer tango festival in Hamburg. And that was for me and some of my buddies and pals the thing to go. And that was so inspiring. It was a total different environment, and we felt everywhere welcomed and accepted, no fear or anything like that. So on and so forth, short story long. I was so inspired, and I started, because in Berlin there was not existing anything anymore. So the group was dissolved, and I was kind of, wherever I go, I start to travel. I lived in Cologne, where I first saw Veronica as the tango babies, with both of us. And probably you remember, I was the only female leader in town. Wherever I went, no matter if it was here in Germany, I went for dancing in Europe, I went over the pond to the United States, and that I was always followed with this fear of rejection, and how will people receive me as a female leader, especially as a female leader who is not expressing physically a heteronormative stereotype as a woman. I felt really vulnerable with that. So then I started the first classes here in Berlin, because I thought the same thing as Shana yesterday mentioned. I want to have a pool of 100 dancers around me. Yes, because I don't want to be the only one. And the dance is so beautiful. And here in Berlin, there's a big ballroom community, queer ballroom community. And I thought I should step up and do something. And it was a long, 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 long way to start. 5 people in the class, the same experience like you had with getting things done, and I started also to teach abroad in the United States, and it built up over the last years. So while I'm dancing tango for nearly 30 years, I think I started in 96, I saw the development of the tango and the queer tango. So it's just little groups in Buenos Aires, in Hamburg, and somewhere, some spread out people, somewhere they all met. And then after a few years, I had local classes here, and I saw the festival in Hamburg. I got very inspired by this mix of wonderful dancers, mainly from Germany, meeting also teachers and artists with interesting new concepts of teaching tango. And the role changing started to step up. So the concept of role change, I established that in my teaching 2005. From the very first beginning, everybody should lead and follow same time. And that was well accepted. For some people it was more difficult to do that, and I didn't force them. If they get better along with just focusing on one role, then they should do that. Yeah, and the change with that, it became a big international movement. Lucky for us, and my festival, I was so excited, and I started the Berlin International Queer Tango Festival 2011 with the emphasis and vision of bringing people together from all over the world, because I met them on my travel teaching and tried to attract them to come to Europe. And also a big focus on queer LGBTIQ teachers and DJs having a platform to present themselves and be visible and to be seen. Because that is still to this time not very common to have open, in the heteronormative tango world, are open for lesbian, gay, or even trans teachers, or and the possibilities to work and as an aspect of showing your artistic work and earning some money is very, very low, and I want to change it. Yes.
And your most valuable lesson?
Well, that is a difficult question. The most valuable lesson is I think the tango is an opportunity to grow as a person, and I see it on myself. I did the tango. I did not only tango. It inspired me to do some modern dancing. I keep on going with contact improvisation, nonviolent communication, and all of that. And it's a spread. And also being into this, there's nothing else than getting mirrored by another person in front of you and learning the lessons. And I would say that tango is the longest relationship in my life. With all the ups and downs, with the frustration and the happiness. And it's a cycle, so I'm stepping now into a new journey, part of the journey. After 13 years of the festival, I start another journey. I'm not retiring, but I need to have finding other ideas to do. And I'm happy that there's a young generation now coming up, like Maria here in Berlin or in other parts of Germany. And I was very impressed seeing so many people from all over the world, and they connect. and they get inspired like I was inspired while I was going when I was 2000 to 2010 in Hamburg.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Maria, please.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here because for me, like for many of you, it brings together different parts of my identity. I come from social work and then also from social sciences. So the social sphere is always present in my thoughts. I've been dancing tango for a long time as a social dancer and for some years as a tango worker in different capacities. I came through Queer Tango. I think it was through the queer ballroom scene actually first that Astrid mentioned in Berlin. I think it was the only possible gate into tango for me for so many reasons. I started in both roles. I still love them equally and there wouldn't be another way. However, now I feel part of various tango communities. I'm very passionate about connecting them. And I want to talk briefly about 3 projects that I've been a part of or that I am still. And if there is a thread through them, I think it's like the search for belonging, but also how to facilitate it to make it possible for a lot of people. The first one is the Feminist Tango Friendship. It was a group that we had in Berlin from 2018 for a few years. That was consisted of about 12 people, wildly diverse in terms of age, and like gender identity, dance experience, what we needed from the community, and inspired by our unrest and also by some groups, similar groups that I was in touch with in Argentina. And our activities were things like workshops of leading for followers, about sensitivity for privileges in tango, offering support for people and communities who had experienced harassment. Also cultural activities, like we organized during the pandemic an open-air exhibition and concert featuring the illustrations of Romina Pernigote that was mentioned 2 days ago, an artist from Buenos Aires. Yeah, so we did a lot of things. People came to our events. We organized also women's milongas for 8th of March, for example. Yet our reach was definitely limited, I think due to our own connections at the time, to some extent, and also because the community wasn't where it is now, like Berlin's tango community since then has come a long way, and these topics are not so wildly weird anymore as they used to be. I think these movements come in waves, and I hope that every time one of these waves dies down, something stays. The second project is our queer and open role marathon in Berlin called El Contrapunto that I've been organizing together with Anna Heydrich for 2 years now. It's pretty much a marathon as you know them, like 50% international, food. It's role balanced for the part that doesn't dance both roles, which is the smaller part. But if you haven't been to one of those events, the social fabric can be wildly different from whatever that means, conventional events. Who feels available to you in the room? What is the culture of invitation? How do people feel free to dress? There's not a group of like waiting followers around, like all these things can be different. The Berlin queer tango community is very much a community in the sense we've discussed. So strong Y, strong bonds, very horizontal. And people felt that this was their event from the beginning. So they really spoke up in terms of what were their expectations, who should be there, blah, blah. We apprehended this and we loved this from the beginning. So we started involving already before the first marathon, a lot of actors from the community, like Astrid, talking about our ideas. And it has continuously been a process of balancing different voices in the different communities with our own vision as well, no? So all of our decisions in the process are quite complex and take into account a lot of different ideas. They are sometimes frictional. We will probably change a lot of them in the future. We try to balance the participants in many ways. There are decisions involving the DJs, like there's a lot that we do to deepen the community. I think for me, what was a little surprising was that like one of my deepest moments of feeling of belonging in tango was the beginning of our first marathon, when people that we invited started showing up and started like glowing together. And I've personally never felt so welcome in tango, at least, I think. And then the third project is the Code of Conduct here at Nou. So this year, Thomas invited me to facilitate a group process to create a Code of Conduct here, which I'm very, very glad to have this possibility to do that. Codes of conduct in terms of like behavioral codes, ideas for problem solving in different situations. They are common to companies and also dance studios, I think more in English-speaking countries. In Germany, tango studios do not have them so far as we know. So we started out having so far 4 meetings with teachers from Nou and also then other core community members to identify core values. That was the first thing we did, such as self-expression or freedom of expression, safety of body and personality, and awareness and communication of personal boundaries. And we, an emphasis was put also on shaping Nou towards a space of exchange and learning as well for the team. And we started turning this into a concise written code that's not published yet. And that has a lot of structures also included, which we tried in certain events, but that have to be made real now. And I think a lot of these structures, such as like having an awareness team, having a feedback loop, defined responsibilities towards the safety of the participants, have a structure that says like, if something happens, how do we deal with it? We need them in the community, right? We need them in all of our events. That's very practical. These are practical things we have to implement. I think another thing that we need now in this direction, at least in Berlin, is a pathway between organizers to communicate about people who have committed harassment, simultaneously protecting the people who have experienced it, and then so that they don't have to repeat their story all the time, right? And to coordinate our actions that we have to take. So moving on to lessons learned, I think it was Stefan or Darko who said yesterday, let's look at the dark side of tango. I do think this is our responsibility. So yeah, we shouldn't pretend, and I think most of you don't, that tango is always a happy place for everyone, right? Or a safe place. And also, and I keep hearing that smaller communities divide the tango scene because it's not like that's very inclusive, right? The broader tango community. But also, I think it's doubted a lot, but I want to emphasize that these moments and places where like wildly different people connect and come together, they really happen. They're very, very possible. And that, for me, that is the goal. Like, that's our art as organizers. That's the magic. And the way I see going there is through ongoing dialogue, but also a form of collective care that we do together.
Thank you. Can you please keep the microphone
yes.
while I do my part? I'm Veronica. I live in Paris. And I'm part of a feminist collective that is called La Connexion Féministe, which is the feminist connection. We try to play with the word connection that refers to tango. And it's a feminist collective that is there for the Parisian tango to specifically fight sexist violence and sexism. And just before the pandemic, we saw a new movement emerge in Argentina, which is called Movimiento Feminista de Tango, who published a manifesto about making tango, taking the machismo out of social tango. And a friend of mine from Paris, Isor Catino, she was inspired and she wrote to me one day out of the blue and said, shall we create a feminist collective and make Paris tango safer for women, specifically, but for everybody else as well. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. And in the beginning, we were 9 women of very different ages and also very different experience time in tango. And I was a professional one, but there were also a lot of, among us were just social dancers with 3 to 5 years of experience. And then a pandemic hit immediately after we had our brilliant idea. So for 2 years of the pandemic, tango not being available, it gave us time to reflect and to prepare our work. And the first thing we did is we sat together and we created a cartography of that we call the life of a tanguera, of all the different situations of harassment, assault, discrimination, sexism, ageism that a woman experiences in heteronormative tango. And what we did is basically just tell each other our own experiences. And we were shocked to find out that we have, among us, experienced all of them, including the most violent cases where you go to court with the perpetrator. We created this cartography and then we asked ourselves, what do we want to do and what do we want to focus on? And our focus was to create a sufficiently safe environment for women in Parisian tango, specifically for women who have less experience and for beginning young women who are often the first victims of sexual harassment and assault. And the moment the Milongas opened, the first action that we did is that we created a flyer that was actually inspired on the flyer that was created by the French government for the pandemic, the simple rules of staying safe during the pandemic. So we basically mimicked it. It was still fresh in people's memory. And it has 4 simple basic rules. They are not gendered. It's not about men versus women. And it just basically says what are the good practices of tango and how to say no if you feel uncomfortable, and that also a good tanda doesn't mean you have to go and have a drink with that person. Very simple things. That immediately proved to be very controversial indeed. At the same time, we created a Facebook page where we published our intent, and we also explained why we call ourselves a feminist collective and not just, you know, more fun and equality in tango, because France has a very strong feminist tradition of feminist thinkers and activists, and we wanted to align with those values. We also participate in 8th of March March every year, and we invite other tango people to participate with us. So we see ourselves as political activists inside tango. And we started distributing these flyers simply in Milongas, and on our Facebook page we opened the possibility for people to leave anonymous testimonies. We created a hashtag that was inspired by Me Too, but in France, balance ton porc. We called it Peita Milonga. And people of all genders and ages and could leave testimonies of difficult situations that they have experienced in tango. And it was simply to raise awareness, and people would go to our page and comment, and we still publish them once a week. A lot of those situations talk about sexual harassment towards women, but some of them also talk about ageism or about discrimination between women in tango and competition. At the same time, we started offering workshops on recognizing what is harassment and sexism in tango context. We did several workshops before Milongas, and then we also offered them to beginner students of various teachers. And what we made them do is play out different scenes from normal Milonga experience where harassment might be very clear, or sometimes there is a power play that is very subtle. And we would have them talk collectively, discuss not only the situation and what do they feel and how they are affected by it, but also if they are a victim of a situation like this or a bystander, what are the possible strategies to dealing with. One of our main goals was to raise awareness among women as a primary target of sexism, on how to recognize situations and to talk to somebody about it, and to be able to find courage to say no or to come out of a freeze response. But our second goal was to help organizers to create protocols and codes of conduct to deal when women talk about harassment and potentially banning the perpetrators. And what was beautiful is that as we created our collective in several other cities of France, women started coming together and created their own collective. And then we very quickly started talking with each other, and we created a network. It's called Réseau Bienveillance. And each collective are doing their own thing. There is one collective that is organizing a festival in Toulouse, and they created one of the first codes of conduct published on their website of the festival. We have a group of leading women in Marseille who are also very politically engaged. And so, for example, this is an example of what we call violentomètre, violence meter, that is inspired on something that a French association for fighting domestic violence has created for potential victims of domestic violence and abuse, on how to recognize and try to assess the gravity of the situation. We looked at it and we said we want to create our own. And so with our feminist collective, this is our most recent action, we also created our own violentomètre. This is in French. We first published it on our Facebook page, and it was very widely shared, and it was very, very well received, and a lot of people took it and brought it to their communities. Now we have created a printed version. You can have a look at it. I will leave it out. And we basically described also non-gendered, so it can be he, she, them, situations where a person, if they experience it, they know what they are experienced and they can talk about it, and they can also do something about it or ask for help. We are currently preparing other languages for this, and we will be distributing digital violence meters also in other languages. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive, with a few people who were very critical, and those tended also to be people who actually display problematic behavior. We had some haters. We had to block them from our page because we are not going into those discussions. And one of the very beautiful things that came out of it is our own. We started as 9 people. We are now 4 women, which makes the processes very much more efficient. People left for various personal reasons. Is that we ourselves feel much more responsible for people's safety, and specifically women's safety in Milonga. We are less disconnected ourselves, and we, just us, already paying attention for what is happening, and we feel inspired to actually be able to help. And we started receiving personal messages from women who have experienced very difficult situations, and we are able to talk to them. We all did some training with specific associations that provide training for harassment, how to deal with harassment. And women are also very grateful to have us as a voice, but also as people to come to, and they even can find us in Milonga, and they come to us and they can feel heard. And my most valuable lesson learned from this feminist activism is social change happens when women support women. That's the strongest driving force for any type of social change. And in tango, it means women choosing to support and be in solidarity with other women over the competition with women for available male partners. And women no longer feeling alone in their experiences, but knowing that these things probably happen to many other women, and they can talk about it, and they can ask for help, and they can be mentored by more experienced women. And we want to create this link between women who are experienced in tango and women who are new to tango, to avoid them falling into the same kind of harassment situations and then just having to deal with it by themselves. So This is my experience. So when we look at valuable lessons, thank you. So your valuable lesson was about tango changing you and changing people and changing communities. Your valuable lesson was about, although tango tends to be kind of exclusive, there are openings for inclusivity. And my valuable lesson was about women supporting women. So when you think about the valuable lessons of one of the other people, do you have something to add? Take the mic, please.
So I think, not specifically on yours, well, on yours, for sure, that is a breakthrough into our communities, because especially women are, by their own stories, from their childhood, maybe have experienced abuse and all of that, and they can be, through different behaviors of men, re-traumatized and standing alone, and that is extremely important. So in my case, I think that the queer tango movement I started, and many others around myself, and we went out into the world, also in the straight communities, that we had shown the straight community that there is an alternative to this old stereotype. Man is leading, women is following, and what comes along with that women are sitting like hands on the fence and waiting for Mr. Right to come, and all of that. Yeah, so there's that was an empowerment for, and it was seen by women and women in the straight, not only in the queer community, because they already know that they have both options. But that was, I think, basically the queer tango, the biggest gift that was offered by the queer tango to the entire community is the liberation of the roles. Yeah. And that is founded by the queer tango community. It was not invented by the straights.
Hallelujah to that. Thank you.
And I have to say that because I have often feel like that the queer communities, they're the queers, and then we are not queer, but it's okay that they're there, right? But they have done a lot, and see how many women are now following all over the world. They liberated themselves. Also men, if they're courage enough, starting to follow and improve their leading and both roads. That's very fantastic. And also Maria's work with several ideas and doing here the code of conducts, and I'm happy to hear that you also involve the teachers, getting aware of what obstacles can come up in the community, while also teaching, maybe changing the teaching also. Same here. Right from the beginning, it's not only to educate the women, but also making both genders or all genders aware of what is a good code of conduct and how to be safe in a community. Yes.
What about you, Maria?
Yeah, for sure I have some points of curiosity to add, I think. So I fully support your point. And I'm also curious about what other forms is the support going to take, except for these kinds of groups that we had, that Argentina now still has one of, that used to be 5 or 6, or 2 are still there, I don't know. Like in Berlin, there are now like smaller structures in place. For example, one WhatsApp group that is very, very well known has a subgroup of safety and support that people can write to. And like there are like just smaller structures within the smaller tango communities. And I'm just curious to hear, like, maybe later, maybe in the break, I don't know, what other structures are developing in other places. And then when it comes to tango and social change, and also personal change, which I think is always like a mutual development, so we can try to use tango for social change. And that is going to change the tango community as well, no? Because people come in, people will go out. There are so many ways of doing that. And I think it will be worthwhile doing that also, like, in a gender-sensitive way. I mean, if you do gender-targeted ads, maybe you attract more leaders, but you will have like you might get a gender-structured community, right? So part of a code of conduct, part of the orientation of a studio can also be, who do we represent in our ads? That in the document you mentioned from the Movimiento Feminista de Tango, this is included, for example. Yeah. So yeah, there are so many ways of doing that, and it helps to be clear of that, I think.
Thank you. I think we have 5 minutes for questions. 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much for all your efforts, and it's very inspirational. I wanted to ask a question about feminist and queer tango and connected to the theme of thriving communities in the future. How do you see the way forward? Do you see it as a kind of an alternative evolution? So you have the mainstream tango, and then you have queer tango, where things are done differently and in a kind of an alternative way? Or is the strategy we have to queer the mainstream community? That's one question. And the second one is, going back to at the end of my presentation, it was, do you remember the chatbot a recommendation that we would have to scale up and interweave the local initiatives that are already been done at the moment? I was wondering, what is your idea about how to move your work forward? Do you think you connected very much to the Paris tango culture, you in Berlin, but how could we make this into something global? Do you collaborate amongst each other? How do you see it to be scaled up, your initiatives, and to make it more?
If I may answer. So your first question was about how does it change do we just create separate communities? What I see happening in Paris since the pandemic, not only because of our feminist collective, but also because way more women started to lead. This is one thing that had happened, which liberated a lot of women to dance with each other in milongas, doing both roles. But it also liberated a lot of men to practice among men and do the following. And what I also see happening in Paris, which might be specific to Paris, is that the queer community has been somewhat on their own until they got really strong and kind of safe. And they are now integrating into the rest of the community. They are coming to my classes, which are not queer tango classes, but they are leading for women classes. And we are creating with people from queer tango. In Paris, we are creating joint initiatives. And when you see the milongas in Paris, they have significantly changed in terms of role, traditional roles. And the second question, what we are doing is we are creating this network in France, where we have different collectives also doing common work. In one of these network efforts, we are trying to come up with a general code of conduct that anyone can use in associations. And we have already had talks with collectives in the US, in Switzerland, I think, that are just interested in our best practices and wanting to implement something in their community. So it's not very structured, but it's happening.
So about the queer tango question, I think we totally need both. We need to maintain the space because that's an important space. It is also to some extent still necessary protective space that has its own culture and is wonderful. And it's also possible for other people to integrate into that, right? It has the space. But of course, the community reaches out, goes to other places, and needs to be welcome there.
All right. Oh, so sorry. I hope I didn't. So, of course, there's also, you heard there's a network of the feminist tango now spreading out also to the United States. The queer tango movement is mainly everywhere in Europe, in nearly every biggest city, United States, East Coast, West Coast. You find it if you Google it up. The other thing I want to mention is, I heard often the question when I'm reaching out to people I know from the straight community, because I was all the time in the straight community, yeah. So as a dancer and as a colleague, I saw rarely straight people coming in, even women. So I said, well, I don't go. I wanted to get them to the festival because you following, why don't you come? Well, I'm not queer, and that makes me, because the queer community is open for people who are respecting the needs and valuables of the community, and it is such a fantastic atmosphere. You cannot compare to big straight events, because it's kind of a laid back atmosphere. You can be who you want, no matter if you're queer, lesbian, gay, trans, or intersexual, or heterosexual, or role preference, even that, or gender identity. I mean, we are open for everyone, as long as everyone respects the need of safetyness of the other, and that comes with the code of conduct and yes, and your work. Yeah, so more straight people to the queer community, because the queer community is coming to the bigger community, to the straight community, integrating into that, but I don't see it so often the other way around, and that makes me a little bit sad.
And actually Paris is an exception, because we have, thank you, quite a long-running queer tango festival where I have both worked and always went as a participant, and I see more and more of the straight community coming to the Queer Tango event, and this year's Queer Tango event was, in my opinion, the best for me ever, because that was so beautiful to see how many of my students, that are just students, they're not like queer tango or anything, were there, and how happy they were in queer tango space. One last question, please.
It's not a question, it's just something I'd like to share. About 8 years ago, I attended an event in Bonn, and it was labeled as an open role event. Right, and it's not straight, it's not queer, and it wasn't amazing. I've never seen something like this advertised since. This is before the pandemic, and I think something like this would maybe gel better with people instead of having a label as straight or queer. Right, just open role. It was amazing. It's one of the best events I ever attended. Till now. Yeah.
There, just like 2 weeks ago, was an open role event organized by the Queer Tango community of Paris, but more with this perspective of just open role. And I know of an event in Turkey like this, and I know of an event somewhere else that in many events coming like this. And I think that comes back to your question also, how do we integrate into one more thriving community? And this is, again, often women being instrumental because they start to lead, and so this whole idea of you have to have male leaders and females followers kind of falls away. It's a win-win for everyone, for literally everyone involved. So if also you want to better your local community, start teaching women how to lead. They will have way more fun dancing, and also men who want to follow will feel way calmer and less pressure to just do that as well. We have to finish, so I think that was amazing. And very emotional, if I may say. Yes. Thank you. We have a break. 2 o'clock.